Good morning and welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Morning Show. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us this morning. If you're watching this live on Facebook, thanks for that. And if you are watching us later or listening to us later at www.livingstonparishnews.com/podcast. We appreciate that as well. Want to remind folks that we do have a free section on our website, www.livingstonparishnews.com/coronavirus, which is where you can find all the latest information. It is free on our website. Again, www.livingstonparishnews.com/coronavirus. Jumping into it today, I-12 still looking pretty clear. However, you're looking at some heavier traffic on the surface streets. Heavy delays, not heavy, but moderate delays at 4-H Club Road, River Road, and 190. Moderate delays at Range Avenue and 190, as well as delays at Jubin Road and 190. So it looks like, as the governor has said at a couple of his press conferences, and we're going to talk about that a little more in a second, it does look like more and more people are trying to go back to work. So we will see how that pans out over the next couple of weeks. Of course, still rolling through April 30th with the stay-at-home order. Talk more about that as well. But looking at some heavier traffic today, but I-12 still clear once you get up on it if you're heading to Baton Rouge. It's currently 57 degrees. 83 degrees is your high, 61 your overnight low. So having those chilly nights here in the late spring as we head towards the summer months. You're going to have clouds today, a small amount. It's looking rather sunny. It's kind of a nice, beautiful day outside right now. But you're looking at a nice day. So it's going to go up about 26 degrees to 57 to 83, and then drop back down to 61 as your overnight low. New information has come out in the Dennis and Cynthia Perkins case, and when we're talking about new information, this is a submission by the state from the State Attorney General's office. Mr. Jeff Landry has made his submission to the court regarding pretty much establishing a motive and displaying in pretty graphic detail, unfortunately, a lot of the evidence that his office and Louisiana Bureau of Investigation had collected on Dennis and Cynthia Perkins regarding the case. There were examples of telephone records and messages between the two regarding doing some of the things that they did. There were lots of pictures with metadata that would suggest that it happened right around the time that they had either been convicted of or accused of doing some of these things. There was also, if you're not sure how big this is, they also found 5 terabytes of child pornography and pornography-related files. It's a pretty difficult read, but they do go into graphic detail. 5 terabytes, if you're wondering. Most phones have about 100 gigabytes of storage space, and a terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, that's most modern cell phones have that amount of storage. This computer itself has about a terabyte, so 5 computers worth of information. It's pretty graphic. It also it sort of sets up at least Dennis, Mr. Dennis Perkins, as having a troubled past. Especially in the late 90s, he tried to apply for the Baton Rouge Police Department and was, after answering certain questions, was declined due to some previous behavior, one of which was exposing himself for beads at Mardi Gras, another of which was making up a credit card number to see if it would work. So some of those things did happen when he was a kid, but some of those happened when he was an adult. So he was declined at that point, and of course, made his way into other law enforcement departments. Along with those, it was established that Dennis and Cynthia Perkins had a history of public exposure, both together and alone. So again, this was State Attorney General Jeff Landry and his office was trying to sort of establish a baseline for the charges that were being pressed on the two individuals, as well as establish a motive for them to lead up to some of the juvenile abuse that they had. One thing that was mentioned was that there was a history of abuse, according to both the child in the house and some friends, especially between Cynthia and the juvenile victim. So it's very graphic. It outlines everything in pretty graphic terms. That's kind of your 32,000 feet view of it. But again, the court's trying to establish a baseline and a motive for these two, and some justification for some of the charges that were pressed against them. That was submitted to the court yesterday, Monday, April 20th. Moving into our normal conversation, the novel coronavirus continues to grow in terms of cases and deaths. However, hospitalizations only grew by a small amount yesterday, while ventilators dropped again. So you're looking at 24,523 coronavirus cases in Louisiana, 1,328 deaths, 1,794 hospitalizations on 332 ventilators. 141,000 tests have been completed across the state, mostly in the major metro areas. In Livingston Parish, you're looking at 149 cases of coronavirus, 8 deaths on 426 tests. Now, one of the things that we noticed here at the news yesterday when reporting the numbers was that the case numbers did not change, the test numbers did not change in Livingston Parish, while the case numbers went up. We found out later in the day at the governor's press conference that the Louisiana Department of Health is drilling down even further. So they're going to be updating that dashboard at ldh.la.gov/coronavirus to look at census tracts. They're not going to be looking at exact addresses or anything like that, but they're going to be drilling down the census tracts to kind of give a heat map on a parish level about where a lot of these cases are. So we're going to be looking for that either Wednesday or Thursday, according to the Department of Health, to kind of get a more drilled down view of what we're looking at in terms of cases on a more on a smaller scale, I guess you can say. So we're also going to be able to see that in other parts of the state, but here in Livingston Parish, finally going to be getting more of that direct and accurate information, especially when it's sort of compared to the parish as a whole. So we'll be able to see where the majority of cases are. Again, that should be coming out either tomorrow or Thursday. Yesterday, the governor kind of delivered a lot of this is sort of hand in hand. One of the things that he's been talking about a lot at his press conferences is anecdotal evidence. And of course, we see it here when we talk in the morning in the traffic patterns, but that more people are getting out there, that are getting out of their house, trying to either go to work or just get out in general. Now, one of the things that he is concerned about is a spike in cases, but as of right now, the state is trending in the right direction to enter that phase 1 economy reopening on May 1st. So what does that mean? Well, yesterday, again, we kind of get a little more down deep into the numbers. And one of the things that the governor said was that you have to have a 14-day trend. So we talked about this yesterday. One of the things that we saw was a case increase from Sunday to Monday. There was a little concern. I mean, does that restart our timeline? The answer is no, which is a nice thing. So there are several metrics that have to be tracked over a 14-day period. You have to have a reduction in the number of people that are presenting with symptoms. That means presenting to the hospital. You have to have a reduction in the number of hospitalizations. And you have to have a overall reduction in new cases per capita per day over that time period. Now, it's all that has to happen in the same 14 days. It's not over 42 days, but that all of those metrics have to stay consistent. 14 days, of course, is the incubation period for the coronavirus. Once you get past that, you can enter phase 1. Now, the interesting thing about it is those benchmarks have to continue. So if you enter phase 1 and then have a massive spike in cases, you got to back off. Now, that's according to federal guidelines. the states don't necessarily have to back off, but the Governor John Bel Edwards has said that he intends to follow the direction and the guidance of the federal task force. This came from President Trump. This phased approach came from President Trump and his federal task force. Dr. Deborah Birx was the one who outlined the pieces of the puzzle. Now, the first thing that's going to be stood up, according to the governor, is going to be expanded health care. This is going to be both elective and non-elective and required procedures. A lot of the things he talked about yesterday were people that needed to go in for cancer treatments, biopsies, heart surgeries, stroke screenings, that sort of thing, neurological appointments. They even talked about dentistry. Dentists will be reopening. If you have a cavity or an infection in your gums, one of the things the Department of Health said was that's very close to your brain. And a lot of times gum and tooth infections can spread to the brain. So it's important to address these. So that's how they described it, as things that are necessary to preserve the health of the populace. We do not want the coronavirus to start causing deaths simply because people could not be getting health care. Now, one of the things that the governor said was the reason this is opening next week is because he's trying to give these doctors' offices time to regather staff, sanitize their offices, and collect PPE. One requirement that doctors' offices are going to have to go through with the Louisiana Department of Health is proof that they have at least 5 days stock of personal protective equipment before they are allowed to reopen. And of course, the governor said going to the doctor's office for any procedure is going to look a lot different than it used to. There's going to be fewer appointments sitting in the waiting room at any given time. There's going to be a lot of social distancing. It's going to be, hopefully you're going to be wearing a mask, and we'll go over those mitigation efforts in a minute. And people are just going to be, spread apart a lot, and they're going to be trying to get people through as quickly as possible to make sure they can see all these folks who have postponed a lot of these elective and non-elective procedures because there was several reasons that extra space at the hospitals were closed down. One, PPE. It's hard to get it. They weren't sure how much they could get, and so they were trying to preserve a lot of the personal protective equipment too. Surge, if they needed those hospital spaces, hospital beds, hospital rooms, they decided that it was time to shut that down for a while. So of course this will be the first industry that has stood back up. Talking about those mitigation efforts, something to remember as the economy reopens. This is something to protect yourself as you're starting to go out and do more shopping and maybe going back to work. Please remember, wash your hands for 20 seconds or more with soap and water. Disinfect common surfaces. Wear a mask in public per CDC guidelines. Don't touch your face. Control your cough and your sneezing with your elbow or a tissue. 10 or less to a gathering, preferably less. Stay home to work if at all possible, and stay home if you're sick, and utilize telehealth to get in touch with your doctor. So please remember those as we're moving forward into reopening the economy. Right now, that is the only industry that the governor is willing to talk about. He's not willing to speculate what will come next. He says he is having multi-times a week a call with his task force, or his commission, which will be formulating task force per industry to try to decide what the best way is to prop those up after healthcare. But expanded healthcare will be first. That begins next Monday, April 27th. So please keep that in mind, especially if you have an elective procedure or a procedure that is necessary. Please give your doctor's office a shout and see if they will be opening or when they'll be opening. It's good to be proactive in that world. Of course, we talked about it before. The Paycheck Protection Program ran out of money. They are trying to refill the trough, I guess you can say. There is currently a class action lawsuit out there against the Small Business Administration and Chase Bank because it according to certain data that was released by the Small Business Administration, it does appear that larger clients were prioritized, at least via Chase Bank. That's not necessarily every bank. And that smaller clients were receiving their loans if there was money left over at the end. So the reason they were able to determine that is the SBA released the initial data early last week and then released a second set of data. What you saw in that first set of data was that most of the money went to loans of $350,000 or more. At median income, that's roughly 30 people or more. Of course, you have to remember that the IRS recognizes small business as 500 or less employees. The SBA, their definition is a little more amorphous. It depends on, production level as well as income or revenue generated. So it's a little different, but for the most part, your mom and pop stores were also competing with 500 or up to 500 employee businesses to get their money. So it was a very difficult situation for a lot of people. Now, it is expected that fund is going to be refunded or refueled at least a little bit. Of course, if you do have a Paycheck Protection Program loan out there, please double check with your banker to make sure you are approved, make sure it is submitted. That way, when that money is released, you will be in line for it. But that was not done yesterday. According to President Donald Trump, early Monday morning, he believed that some of those things were going to be in place by the end of the day. Not quite there yet, but there was hope at the end of the day that some of this was going to be in place. Of course, a lot of the Democrats are looking for more money for testing, which the Republicans have sort of relented and said, okay, we can get down on that, but it's going to be interesting to see what that final amount is and how that's implemented. So that's kind of, you're getting down into the minutia of the deal, which is usually a good sign. That usually means it's moving forward. Both sides have kind of accepted the terms. They are accepted the idea of the deal. They got to settle out the terms. So hopefully for a lot of those small businesses that missed the PPP loan the first time around are going to be getting some relief here in the coming days. Couldn't come anytime sooner. The oil industry has experienced what you can call a heart attack. Of course, if you're looking at oil futures, they are in the negative. What that means is there is more supply than there is demand, and they're basically, they're not technically paying people to take the oil, but oil is effectively worth $0 a barrel and is worth negative in the future. One of the things that was explained yesterday is that the oil industry, it is actually cheaper for them to just keep producing oil at a loss than it is to shut down a rig for any amount of time. One, they don't know how long this will last, and two, it's just sort of the logistics and the metrics of the deal. However, one of the things that was expressed several weeks ago through a survey from Louisiana Oil and Gas Association as well as Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association is that roughly 50% of the wells in Louisiana face closure, with 60% of that workforce being laid off. A lot we've talked in the past, probably not on the shows before I started the show, but that Louisiana economy, a lot of people are aware. The budget is in large part based on the cost of a barrel of oil. Of course, right now that's zero. And a lot of the Louisiana economy is dependent on not only oil production, especially for use of the oil itself, but also the sort of byproducts of the oil. It's a major employer. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that affects the Louisiana economy going forward. Of course, this all started because Saudi Arabia and Russia got into it about who was going to control the price of oil, and they continued to supply. The price dropped. And of course, with COVID-19, demand for gas is reduced because a lot of people are staying home. So it was kind of a perfect storm to disrupt the Louisiana oil industry and the American oil industry. And it's going to be interesting to see how they try to bounce back in the future once prices kind of get back to a new normal. Not entirely sure how long that's going to take. The Department of Education submitted a survey to all 192 school districts in Louisiana. All 192 districts responded between April 7th and April 17th, and the department released that information. You can find the full report at www.livingstonparishnews.com/coronavirus. But one of the things that it had in there was student needs in terms of distance learning. And of course, Livingston Parish submitted their signed survey directly to the news. And we kind of got to get an idea of where our local school district stands. So let's first talk about a few statistics here. 700,000 students are enrolled in 1,400 schools in 192 districts across the state. In Livingston Parish, you're looking at 27,000 students at 44 school sites. Now, one of the interesting things that came out of this was that 38% of students do not have a laptop or computer at home. However, the number of students that did have a phone was much higher. It was in the 90 percentile. However, again, only about 62% of students have a tablet or computer at home. Here's another interesting thing. 25% of Livingston Parish students do not have home internet. So they do not have access to that internet or to the internet to be able to distance learn on a regular basis with their teachers. Thankfully, the Livingston Parish schools have elected to be a mix, which is what most school systems are doing, between high-tech and low-tech distance learning. The schools are also providing at least weekly some response to these students with regard to their work. Some other interesting things were Livingston Parish intends to offer summer school for those who will need it. It will be a distance learning environment at this time. So please keep that in mind. Please contact your school if you believe your child needs summer school, or the school will contact you if they believe your child needs summer school. There will be no early start to next year's school year. There are some districts that will be doing an early start. Livingston Parish is not one of them. One of the things that Livingston Parish is doing to prepare for the future, and this sort of lends itself not only to distance learning for summer school, but also to what the governor has said regarding school looking different next year. Livingston Parish has requested the Louisiana Department of Education's help with teacher training on distance learning, more access to technology for both teachers and students. Now, it should be noted that 95% of teachers said that they at least had the internet and technological capability to teach or distance teach from home. And most importantly, the third thing that the Livingston Parish School District was looking for was more access and more ability to assess individual academic progress. Let me say that one more time. More ways to assess individual academic progress per student. Good Lord. Why am I having so much trouble with that this morning? One last time. More ways to assess individual academic progress for individual students. Now, what does that mean? One of the things that the Louisiana Department of Education has stipulated is that individual school districts, it will be up to those districts to determine whether or not a child is ready for advancement. If you'll remember, the governor has waived responsibility testing for schools in Louisiana this year. So there's no end of year testing. There's no, there's going to be some end of year grades, but for the most part, a lot of kids aren't receiving grades for these things. There's a whole quarter that's going to be missing, about a whole quarter of school. So they're going to be looking towards what's the best way to assess these kids to help them move to the new grade. So that's something that we need to be keeping an eye on with the schools to see how they determine that. Of course, school coming up to an end here in about 3 weeks. So we'll be seeing what kind of decisions they make going forward. And of course, the school districts continue to remind these kids that you will graduate. We're just not entirely sure what that looks like yet. So please remember, if you see a senior, give them your thoughts. If you have a senior at home, give them a hug. If you don't know them, reach out to them, say you're thinking about them, because of course they started their high school career with the flood. They are now ending it with the coronavirus. So, please keep those kids in your thoughts and prayers. Walker announced that parts of Sidney Hutchinson Park will be open to the public. That includes the fishing pond as well as the walking trails. The city asks that individuals please remember to social distance. If they see too many people out there, they will have to start some kind of enforcement. However, they're looking to open the park, much like North Park has remained open, to give citizens a place to go to get outside for some of those folks that don't really have anywhere to go. So again, Sidney Hutchinson Park in Walker, opening portions of it, the sort of the larger, more rangy portions, which includes the fishing pond as well as the walking trails, to try to help Walker citizens be able to get outside. Let's remind you of these mitigation efforts real quick. Wash your hands for 20 seconds or more with soap and water. Disinfect common surfaces. Wear a mask per CDC guidelines. Don't touch your face. Control your cough and sneezing with a tissue or your elbow. 10 or less to a gathering, preferably less, according to the governor. Stay home if you can to work. and stay home if you are sick, and utilize telehealth to get in touch with your doctor. Let's go. Please remember that we talked about Dennis and Cynthia Perkins this morning. Of course, Attorney General Jeff Landry submitted the initial filing to show motive, as well as give some clarity to the charges that had been pressed against Dennis and Cynthia Perkins. As far as the coronavirus, 24,523 cases, 1,328 deaths, 1,794 hospitalizations on 332 ventilators, 141,000 tests statewide. In Livingston Parish, 149 cases, 8 deaths, and 426 tests. Looking at your traffic real quick, please remember that you're looking at more delays at Forage Club Road, River Road, and 190. You're also looking at delays at Jubin Road and 190, as well as Range and 190. However, the interstate does look clear. Again, some anecdotal evidence that it looks like folks are starting to get back into the groove and trying to go back to work. However, quite a few people, which is interesting, have stated that they do not intend, they intend to kind of continue doing the stay at home, give those essential workers more berth at their work. Please remember, it's currently 58 degrees. 83 degrees is your high today, going to be sort of a mix of clouds and sun, probably more sun. And 61 degrees is your overnight low. One last time, my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us this morning for the Livingston Parish News Morning Show. Please remember that we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays. It's $7 a month for that. I keep talking about the bonus edition. April just happens to be one of those months. Going to be 5 editions in April. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. Please remember we do have a free section dedicated completely to the coronavirus, and it's all free. www.livingstonparishnews.com/coronavirus. We appreciate you joining us this morning. Hope you have a great day. It is a beautiful day outside, and we will see you tomorrow morning.